Welcome to Griffonomics. Welcome to you joining us for this deep dive.
Glad to be here for this one. It's a really interesting case study today.
It really is. Imagine building a software product so incredibly efficient that your customers no longer need to buy it.
Right. You basically solve the problem so well that you lose the customer.
Exactly. You successfully automate your clients' workflows, you save them millions of hours, and as a reward, you automate yourself right out of a recurring subscription.
Which is a terrible business model.
Terrible. But today, we're unpacking a fascinating stack of sources to see how one company is trying to survive exactly that. We've got Q1 2026 earnings transcripts, the 10K and 10Q financial filings, conference transcripts from Morgan Stanley and Barclays, and some incredibly granular forensic analyses.
There is a lot to get through.
Yeah, and our mission for this deep dive is to generate a strategic report and investment roadmap exploring Appian. We are tracking their critical, really high-stakes transition from being a low-code app builder to becoming a mission-critical AI infrastructure player.
And to truly grasp the stakes of this transition, we really have to start with that paradox you just mentioned.
The automating yourself out of a job thing.
Yeah, exactly. Forensic analysts are calling this the automation arbitrage. Appian is currently in a frantic race against its own technology. I mean, they have to monetize AI usage faster than AI-driven automation destroys the need for traditional human seat-based software licenses.
So it's the classic gym membership dilemma.
Oh, right.
You join a gym, the gym successfully helps you lose weight, but once you're fit, you cancel your membership because you just don't need it anymore.
Right, you're done.
So if Appian has historically charged companies per human user, a seat, and their new AI makes those humans 10 times more productive, the enterprise needs fewer humans.
Which means they buy fewer software seats.
Right.
That structural fear is precisely why Morgan Stanley downgraded Appian back in April of 2026. The analysts flag this as seat erosion.
Seat erosion. That sounds ominous.
Well, it is. If you are managing an IT budget right now, you are actively looking for ways to consolidate licenses. Appian had to figure out a way to counter this existential threat, to basically decouple their revenue from their clients' human headcount.
Which is tough.
Very. So they rolled out a three-pronged counter strategy.
Okay, let's unpack this. How do you charge a company more money for fewer users without them walking away?
So the first prong is AI-inclusive subscription tiers. They essentially created a toll road for production-grade AI. If an enterprise wants access to the most powerful AI features, they are forced to upgrade to Appian's advanced or premium tiers.
And I'm guessing that upgrade isn't cheap.
Not at all. Those upgraded tiers come with a mandatory price uplift of 25% to 35%. And the transition is already happening. I mean, nearly 40% of their customers have adopted these higher tiers.
Okay, that makes sense. Even if a company shrinks its Appian user base by, say, 10%, Appian is charging 30% more for the remaining seats, so the net revenue yield per customer still goes up.
Yeah.
But eventually, there's a limit to how much you can hike the price per human, right?
Which brings us to the second prong, consumption-based AI actions. This is their bridge to a fully usage-based future. Appian sets predefined limits on how much AI agent activity a client gets within their tier.
Like a data cap on your phone plan.
Precisely like a data cap. Once a client exceeds those limits, Appian starts billing them incrementally for the external computing resources consumed. So every time the AI executes a task via an API call, the meter is running.
So they are shifting from taxing the human's access to monetizing the machine's actual output.
Yeah, it's the mechanism, yeah. And the third prong ties it all together, outcome-based value selling. The Appian sales team is completely changing their pitch.
How so?
They are refusing to haggle over the bulk volume of user licenses. Instead, they are positioning their pricing as a percentage of the absolute value generated.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, in the sources, there's an example of an aerospace customer who achieved $60 million in operational savings using Appian. When you deliver that scale of ROI, the software cost is justified by the outcome, not by a simple headcount of who logged in.
I get the pricing strategy, I really do. But I have a massive structural question here.
Okay, what of it?
Generative AI is notoriously probabilistic. I mean, it hallucinates, it makes things up, it hallucinates legal precedents and financial data. So how on earth is Appian convincing defense agencies and global banks like highly regulated industries to trust it with mission-critical tasks?
It's a huge hurdle.
Right. If an AI hallucinates a regulatory filing, that aerospace company isn't saving $60 million. They are facing a federal audit.
That skepticism is exactly what Appian is trying to capitalize on with their deterministic AI moat.
Deterministic AI.
Yeah, their strategy, which they call serious AI, acknowledges that raw generative models are dangerous for the enterprise. So Appian doesn't sell a raw open-ended chatbot. They act as a strict deterministic operating system. They take that unpredictable AI and wrap it tightly inside traditional hard-coded process automation guardrails.
So instead of an open text box where an employee says, process this claim, and just hopes the AI gets it right, it's more structured.
Much more.
It's like having a brilliant but highly erratic chef in the kitchen. Appian isn't the chef. Appian is the expediter at the front counter. They don't cook the food, but they check every single plate against a strict recipe checklist before it ever goes out to the customer.
That expediter analogy perfectly captures the information flow. The AI is restricted to specific data extraction tasks rather than open-ended reasoning.
Got it.
And we can see this mechanism translating into real-world metrics, particularly with their Dot Center product. Dot Center automatically extracts data from complex, unstructured documents. Because the AI is operating within those strict deterministic guardrails, Doc Center is running at over 95% accuracy.
Which is a massive leap. I think traditional optical character recognition, like, the old software that scans PDFs, typically hovers around 60% or 70% accuracy for really messy documents.
Yeah, it's night and day. The delta between 60% and 95% is the difference between a tool being a helpful suggestion and tool being a fully automated assembly line.
Right.
What's fascinating here is the demand for that reliability is so high that Appian customers process more document pages through DOS Center in the first quarter of 2026 than they did in the entirety of 2025.
Wait, really? That kind of quarter-over-year volume spike is wild.
It's huge.
I have to imagine the only people who care that deeply about closing that accuracy gap are industries where a single typo triggers a multi-million-dollar lawsuit.
Well, the data backs up your theory. The primary use case highlighted in the earnings call was an international insurance company. They named Appian their AI document intake standard. They are using it to process highly complex, unstructured physician statements, and they are actually hitting 98% accuracy. By automating that specific workflow, they expect to eliminate $100 million in operational costs by 2030.
Wow. And it isn't just parsing PDFs, right? Because the 10K also talks heavily about legacy modernization.
Yes, that's a huge piece of it.
There's a case study in here about Hitachi using Appian's AI-accelerated development to consolidate over 500 separate, outdated legacy systems into just one central application.
Yeah, going from 500 down to one is just...
Consolidating 500 systems sounds like an IT director's dream.
Absolutely.
But it makes me wonder how that architectural simplification translates into Appian's actual bank account. Building these bespoke, ironclad guardrails for a giant like Hitachi cannot be cheap. Is this pivot actually creating a sustainable profitability?
If we look at the financial forensics from Q1 2026, the metrics strongly suggest the pivot is working. Driven by this AI demand, Appian's cloud subscription revenue surged 25% year over year to $124.5 million.
Okay, that's a solid jump.
Furthermore, their cloud net ARR expansion, which measures how much more existing customers are spending compared to last year, ticked up to 115%.
Nice.
But the metric analysts are really watching is their Rule of 40 score, which hit a record high of 42.
Let me do the back-of-the-napkin math on that, because the Rule of 40 is the ultimate benchmark for software health. If I remember correctly, you just add the revenue growth rate to the profit margin, and if it's over 40, the company is striking the perfect balance between scaling and making money.
That's the formula, yeah.
So if their cloud revenue grew at 25%, and they hit a score of 42, that implies a 17% profit margin.
Your math is spot on. They are balancing the aggressive growth required in the AI space with solid underlying economics.
But hold on, let's look under the hood of those economics, because standard accounting paints a very different picture.
It does.
When I look at the income statement, Appian reported a GAAP operating income of just $3.2 million. But management is out there touting an adjusted EBITDA of $26.6 million. Bridging that $23 million gap requires a lot of adjustments. Why does standard accounting hide the cash-generating reality of the business here?
It's a critical distinction. GAAP, generally accepted accounting principles, requires companies to include non-cash expenses and one-time events that don't necessarily reflect the daily cash engine of the business.
Right.
To bridge that gap to adjusted EBITDA, we have to look at what management is adding back. They add back standard non-cash items like depreciation and stock-based compensation. But the most significant and frankly the most scrutinized add back is a $6.9 million quarterly drain for litigation expenses related to the Pegasystems lawsuit.
The Pegasystems legal war.
Yes.
For some context, Appian won a historic $2.036 billion jury verdict against their rival Pegasystems a few years ago for trade secret misappropriation. It was one of the biggest software verdicts in history.
It was, but the landscape of that dispute shifted dramatically. In early 2026, the Supreme Court of Virginia overturned that $2 billion verdict.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, the appellate court found issues with how the jury was instructed in the original trial. As a result, the case has been remanded for a full retrial, which is now scheduled for January 2027.
So the $2 billion windfall is gone, at least for now. And from a legal standpoint, doesn't an appellate remand mean they start back at square one? Like, the burden of proof shifts entirely back onto Appian to prove the trade secret theft without any of the evidentiary rulings that went in their favor the first time.
That is the legal reality. They have to litigate the entire case from scratch. And financially, management has adapted to this reality. They are no longer treating this lawsuit as an imminent, massive cash injection.
You can't afford to.
Right. Instead, they are treating it as a long-tail operational expense. They are burning nearly $7 million a quarter to fight this retrial and a secondary defamation suit. They have explicitly excluded any potential damages from their operational planning.
So by isolating that $6.9 million legal drain and adding it back to reach that $26.6 million adjusted EBITDA, Appian is essentially telling Wall Street, judge our software business on its own merits and stop treating our stock like a $2 billion lottery ticket.
That is the exact message they are sending to the market. They want investors focused on the core operations.
Well, speaking of those core operations, I want to push back on a glaring contradiction I saw in the revenue mix. Appian brands itself as a modern low-code platform, right?
Yes, that's their heritage.
Low-code implies that it's intuitive, that citizen developers can drag and drop to build apps. Yet their professional services revenue surged 31% to $41.9 million for the quarter.
It did.
If the software is so intuitive, why are customers spending over $40 million a quarter on consultants to help them use it? Doesn't a massive spike in consulting revenue mean the product is actually too hard to deploy?
It's a very common initial reaction. You see high services revenue in a software company and assume it's a self-service failure. But in the context of enterprise AI, it actually highlights Appian's mission-critical moat.
How does needing a consultant prove a moat?
Because enterprise AI at the highest level is fundamentally not self-service. If you are a hospital trying to get a generative AI model to process complex medical records, or if you are the military digitizing procurement contracts, you cannot rely on a low-code drag-and-drop interface out of the box.
The stakes are too high.
Way too high. Getting from 80% accuracy to that required 98% accuracy requires intense expert implementation. You need Appian's professional services architects to iteratively tune the models, integrate the legacy databases, and build those deterministic guardrails we discussed earlier.
I see. So the complexity is a feature, not a bug. They aren't building simple internal HR portals for booking vacation days. They're building the core nervous system for organizations that cannot legally afford a single hallucination.
Exactly. This surge in professional services proves that Appian is securing highly complex, incredibly sticky enterprise workloads. Once Appian's consultants wire those custom guardrails into a bank's mainframe, that bank is practically never going to churn.
Makes sense. Now, to fund a $7 million quarterly legal burn rate and to pay for the massive infrastructure needed to build these complex moats, Appian can't rely on month-to-month commercial clients.
Not at all.
They need ironclad, decade-long contracts that provide massive, predictable cash flows, which explains why they are aggressively targeting the single largest software buyer on Earth, the U.S. military.
The federal footprint is where Appian has established its most formidable barrier to entry. In January 2026, Appian secured a $500 million 10-year enterprise agreement with the U.S. Army.
$500 million.
Yeah. This is a watershed moment because it allows the Army to start doing fragmented one-off pilot projects and start deploying mission-ready AI capabilities across the entire force. And the technological linchpin of this deal is the Appian Defense Cloud, which secured an Impact Level 5 or IL5 authorization.
And for those not familiar with defense procurement, IL5 is serious clearance.
Very serious.
That level handles highly sensitive, unclassified military data logistics, troop movements, critical infrastructure. Getting an IL5 authorization usually takes years of security audits.
It does, and Appian leveraged that clearance into a massive deployment advantage. The Appian Defense Cloud operates as a cloud tenant directly integrated into the military's Carmi 2.0 environment. Because they are already inside the perimeter, military clients using Appian can bypass the typical 12-month security review cycle for new applications. They can build and deploy securely in weeks instead of years.
That speed of deployment is a huge competitive edge. Well, let's look at the financials of this Army deal. A headline say $500 million, but this isn't the Army wiring $500 million to Appian's bank account today.
No, it doesn't work like that.
It's structured as an IDIQ, an indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity contract. It's essentially a $500 million hunting license. The Army has the option to buy up to that amount over 10 years, but Appian still has to go out and hunt for the specific task orders from individual commanders, right?
Management embraces that exact description. It is a hunting license. But what that framework provides is a pre-negotiated, predictable annual cost structure. The federal procurement cycle is notoriously lumpy, meaning revenue spikes wildly depending on when budgets are passed and contracts are signed.
Right.
The IDIQ structure aims to smooth out that lumpiness by setting a baseline for multi-year spending.
And we can actually trace the cash impact of that federal strategy on the balance sheet.
Yeah.
In Q1, Appian reported $320.4 million in current deferred revenue.
Which is massive.
Yeah, deferred revenue is cash they've collected upfront for subscriptions that they haven't recognized as revenue on the income statement yet. When you reconcile that against their cash flow, it becomes clear that these multi-year federal prepayments are acting as a massive operational tailwind. It heavily bolstered their $48.8 million in operating cash flow for the quarter.
That deferred revenue provides a fantastic financial cushion. However, while the federal footprint is their strongest anchor, we need to look ahead to the second half of 2026. That anchor is about to face a severe stress test.
The recompetes.
Exactly. We are tracking a critical recompete window, essentially task order cliffs, where Appian's existing federal contracts expire and they must defend their territory from competitors.
The biggest cliff on the schedule is the DISA Ideas recompete in August 2026.
Correct. The Defense Information Systems Agency, DISA, currently uses Appian for Ideas, which is a mission-critical system handling complex procurement workflows. That contract expires on August 31st, and it has an estimated obligated value of up to $93 million. Make no mistake, this is unequivocally a must-win battle for Appian to maintain its baseline defense revenue.
But if Appian already has this system locked in, and it's deeply integrated with IL5 clearance, what is the actual threat? Why are forensic analysts sweating a renewal?
The threat comes from the broader competitive landscape, primarily from ServiceNow and, to a lesser extent, Salesforce. ServiceNow is a massive enterprise IT behemoth, and they have also secured a DISA IL5 authorization for their national security cloud.
So they have the exact same security clearance. I can see the sales pitch from here, vendor consolidation.
Bingo.
If DISA is already using ServiceNow for their basic IT help desks and operations, ServiceNow will aggressively argue, why pay Appian $93 million for procurement? Just move that workflow onto our platform, reduce your vendor sprawl, and save the taxpayers money.
That consolidation pitch is highly effective in a constrained government budget environment, so Appian has to counter it. And they defend their turf using a concept called GOTS reusability.
Wow.
GOTS stands for Government Off the Shelf.
How does that counter consolidation?
Well, Appian's architecture allows different government agencies to securely lift and shift applications that were built by other agencies. They don't have to start from scratch. Appian points to massive success stories elsewhere in the Department of Defense to prove this value. Specifically, they use the U.S. Air Force's CON-IT system as their prime case study.
Ah, CON-IT. That's the single contract writing solution used across the entire Air Force.
And here's the crucial connection. The CON-IT system was originally lifted directly from the DISA Ideas code baseline.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. By taking that existing Appian code and using it to modernize its own tech stack, the Air Force was able to consolidate 500 of its own legacy systems and save $80 million annually.
That's a huge savings.
Appian's defense strategy against ServiceNow is to use that $80 million savings as a shield. They argue that switching vendors for the sake of consolidation would force the government to abandon years of highly optimized, reusable custom code. It would trigger a multi-year, highly expensive modernization gap that negates any superficial software savings.
That's a really strong counter-argument. And it's not just the defense sector facing these cliffs. There's a critical civil anchor in the second half of 2026 as well. The GSA, the General Services Administration, has a software renewal coming up on August 3rd.
Yeah, the GSA is another big one.
In terms of dollar amount, it's much smaller than DISA, estimated between $2 million and $4.9 million. But the GSA is the acquisition engine for the entire federal government. They set the standard. If Appian loses the GSA renewal, it would severely hurt their visibility and credibility as a preferred tool across all other civilian agencies.
And hovering over all of these specific H2 2026 recompetes, both DISA and the GSA, is a broader macroeconomic risk. The U.S. government operates on a fiscal year that ends September 30th. If Congress fails to pass a full 2027 budget by that date, the government will likely operate under a continuing resolution, or a CR.
Right. And a CR freezes funding at the previous year's levels and generally prevents agencies from starting new programs or signing massive new vendor contracts.
Which means a CR would likely delay these critical recompete awards out of the fall and into calendar year 2027. That wouldn't necessarily mean Appian lost the contracts, but it would blow a temporary, highly visible revenue hole in their Q3 and Q4 financial reports.
Which would absolutely spook Wall Street, even if the underlying business is totally fine.
Exactly.
So, as we zoom out, what does this all mean for you? Whether you are an IT director evaluating software infrastructure for your own company, an investor tracking market trends, or simply someone trying to understand where the enterprise AI market is actually heading, Appian's journey proves a fundamental truth. The real value of artificial intelligence in the enterprise isn't in raw, unbridled intelligence. It's in the guardrails you place around it.
Yeah, without the guardrails, it's useless for enterprise.
It's the deterministic tracks that keep the probabilistic engine from derailing and causing catastrophic damage. Appian is betting its entire future on the idea that reliability, security, and accuracy are worth a 30% price premium.
And looking at that strategy leaves us with a final, somewhat provocative thought to consider. Let's assume Appian successfully proves its thesis. Let's say they prove beyond a doubt that raw generative AI is simply too dangerous for the enterprise without a rigid, deterministic process layer dictating its actions. If they build the perfect enterprise guardrails, what happens to their identity? Do they remain a fiercely independent software vendor, fighting month to month for individual agency contracts? Or do they inevitably become a prime acquisition target? Because the massive cloud and AI giants, the Microsofts, the Googles, the Amazons, they desperately need that exact security layer to safely sell their own language models to governments and global banks.
That's defined. Portfolio protected.